What's up, everybody? This is Brian Davidson, and you are listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast brought to you by NIL Game Plan, your number one source for NIL news and, more importantly, education across all collegiate sports. Let's get after it. Mitch Gilfillan is one of the country's leading voices in NIL and college athletics law. Mitch has invited athletes, families, coaches, universities, collectives, and even the NBA PA on some most important issues shaping college sports today. He's also a former Division I athlete and a coach himself, which gives him a unique perspective on what athletes are experiencing both on and off the court. Mitch, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, Mitch, you've lived a very unique life in that in college athletics, you've seen it from every angle. You've been an athlete, a coach, and now even an attorney. Let's rewind and talk about that journey. Let's talk about your journey to becoming a college athlete. Can you tell us your recruiting story?
Yeah, thank you. I was actually a three-sport athlete growing up, and basketball was probably my second best sport. So I was heavily recruited in soccer, but my dream was always to play Division I basketball. Going through the process, the recruiting process, and then AAU, there were opportunities that came up, a lot of Division II, a lot of Division III. And then ultimately, I started to gain a lot of interest from Princeton University and Lehigh University. I got to give much credit to my high school basketball coach at the time, Mike Bonzik, for putting me on a national select Nike team, St. Louis Eagles, which is now Bradley Beal Elite. And that put me in front of college coaches across the country, got me an invite to Nike All-America camp, and I was really able to play against the top players in the country and earn the Division I scholarship I always dreamed of. Amazing.
And talk about being an athlete and then transitioning to actually being a coach at that level.
Yeah, once you're done playing, everybody always has aspirations, at least I did, to play professionally. And when I realized that was no longer a reality, naturally to stay close or connected to the game, coaching is a natural progression for a lot of athletes. After my playing career, I wanted to be a college Division I coach, and I was able to do that for 6 years. Coached at Ball State University, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and then I finished at Illinois State University in various roles. I was a director of operations. I was an assistant coach. And it ultimately came down to me realizing that college coaching is a very difficult profession to be in. The reality
that it is.
It is. You basically place your hands in your career in 18 to 22-year-olds' willingness to compete every night. And that can be sometimes tough to do, and then for them to make shots, et cetera. So I had a law degree to fall back on, and I realized that was a great natural progression for me to be more involved in my kids' life too.
So you became an attorney, but then how did you find your way back to this world of college sports?
Great question. This was the perfect intersection of sports and law about 5-6 years ago when NIL started to come about. It really started in about 2019 with state legislators in California trying to pass, legislation and bills forward to allow student athletes to profit, if you will, off of their name, image, and likeness. But this had been in the works for decades, NIL,
Sure.
And where this is ultimately going. And so for me, having a sports background as a Division I player and a Division I coach, and now being a lawyer, I was able to really understand and see both sides of the aisle as to what these families, these coaches, and these universities are going through, now allowing players to be paid. And so for me, it was a natural, stepping stone for me to really dive headfirst into it.
And how does that unique experience shape the way you advise athletes and families today?
I think it's perspective. I think when you've been recruited and when you have recruited student athletes, I think you're able to understand what they're going through. Now, this is a totally different hemisphere than we've ever been a part of on what's
Sure.
going on now. And so I think my playing career and my coaching career has really allowed me the opportunity to have that perspective that families need and want going through this process. Because here's the reality is when you go through it, you typically only go through it one time. Having been recruited myself and then recruiting, hundreds of student athletes throughout my college coaching career, you start to gain a sense of understanding and feelings for what these families are going through. And now that I see the law side of it, I think my counsel, my advice can be really advantageous to help families going forward.
That's really interesting you bring that up. And in a previous interview in my previous life working at NCAA athletic recruiting, We always talked about a 4-year decision, actually was a 40-year decision. But the transfer portal has really changed things. From your perspective as a lawyer and the legal side of this equation, is it truly a 40-year decision? Or is that change? Is that calculus change and that you can actually make decisions along the way to change your both educational as well as athletic route as you grow in your journey?
A lot of it depends on what your ultimate end game is. For a lot of student athletes, and I will say an overwhelming number, it's still about the educational component. And I don't want that to get lost in this discussion or any discussion that I ever have, that going to school is ultimately for education. However, sports often is a part of that. And if you're lucky enough to earn a Division I, II, any sort of scholarship, play junior college, NAIA, it does not matter. The ultimate goal is to earn the degree. Is because everybody at some point the ball stops bouncing, the whatever metaphor or saying you want to use, at some point you got to realize I've got a lot of life left to live. And the average age for a lot of student athletes to be done with their career is between 22 to 26. And for most of us, that's 40 more years in the actual workforce on what you're going to do in your next life, so to speak. So I think every university, every recruiting pitch, every sales pitch is different as to what you can do. And the reality of it is now is that some coaches are telling student athletes, come here for 9 months and we'll ship you off for a better price. And we'll get you a better deal if you have success here. So I think the model has significantly changed these last 5 years.
And what would be your advice to that student athlete that's hearing that recruiting pitch about come here for 9 months and then you'll be better off?
It depends what your motivation is. If your motivation is truly financial, then I get that. That makes sense. If you're trying to, essentially, hit it big and launch your career somewhere else, then I completely understand that. But if you're going somewhere for the culture, for the fit, for the campus, for the facilities, and most importantly, the relationships of the coaches that are ultimately going to coach and mentor you, then I think you need to take a step back and look at it differently. But if you're purely in it just for immediate financial gain, I think that can ultimately set you up for long-term failure. Nothing in life is ever as this short-term gain where you are able to capitalize in 9 months on your name, image, likeness like you will for the rest of your life. At no other employment that you face in the future will you be able to capitalize in 9 to 12 months and earn a bonus, if you will, off of something that is so short-term and so short, so temporary. And I think that is ultimately going to impact generations for years to come to realize that the ultimate win here is long-term and sustainable success, not some short-term fix.
Today's episode is sponsored by NIL Game Plan. NIL Game Plan helps student athletes and their families navigate the world of NIL with confidence. From building a personal brand and creating content to understanding financial opportunities and planning for the future, NIL Game Plan provides practical tools and guidance every step of the way. What sets NIL Game Plan apart is that it's designed specifically for middle school, high school, and college student athletes, making NIL education accessible, simple, and actionable no matter where they are in their journey. So whether you're just getting started or already growing your brand, NIL Game Plan helps you take control and protect your future. And the best part, you can get started for free today at nilgameplan.com. Big thanks to NIL Game Plan for sponsoring today's episode.
Love that. Let's rewind back to 2021 when NIL is first becoming a thing. Did you realize immediately how much this was going to change sports, knowing that you were kind of ahead of the curve and thinking about these changes? Or has the speed of the change shocked even you?
It has shocked me, and I'd be lying to myself and to you to say that I didn't, I expected this to happen so soon, so fast. What I expected to happen was over the course of 5 to 10 years, the hole would start to widen. But what we're seeing now is an absolute avalanche coming down a mountain of financial payments going to essentially men's basketball, football, and some of the top tier women's basketball players. That's where the majority of this NIL and revenue sharing landscape is being allocated for. Keep in mind, at these universities, there's sometimes 20 to 24 other sports that are not receiving any of this, that may be getting a portion or even a breadcrumb of what some of these other programs are getting. So I think where it's gone in the past 4 to 5 years has been on a rapid pace that nobody expected or anticipated. And obviously there's legal consequences because of that.
Let's talk about those legal consequences, specifically for the student athletes and the families themselves. Let's first talk about football, basketball, women's basketball at that higher end. What would you advise those families to start thinking about, especially at an early age, from both a tax planning, revenue maximization, as well as a student athlete well-being perspective? How should they start thinking about this once in a lifetime opportunity at an early age?
Yeah, you have to realize that if you're offered a $100,000 deal, that can become $45,000 net faster than you can believe. And so I think it's really important to have financial literacy. I think it's really important to have attorney or agent understanding of what you're actually agreeing to. And I think it's important to understand, potential tax consequences from all of this. And that's something I believe is getting lost in some of these, massive deals or massive reporting, is that there's real life consequences to receiving a lot of money. And my goal and my role in a lot of this has been to consult families on that and to consult universities or help guide universities to help their student athletes on what's actually happening here. Is because you can quickly find yourself in hot water if you believe that this revenue share payment or this NIL contract quickly becomes money that is entirely yours. When the IRS has not had their costs paid yet, when an agent or attorney hasn't had their costs paid yet, when any other sort of cost that come associated with a business deal like this, is there's longer term effects. And what you would hate to see is a year or two down the road is student athletes or their families getting caught in this matrix of having to owe money back for not understanding money on the front end.
In staying in this bucket, is there any piece of advice you'd offer to those student athletes and families on both a tax function as well as the function of either representation through a lawyer or a specific sports agent that's licensed in a specific agency world?
Yeah, I think anytime you're dealing with a significant amount of money, which what I would consider anything, $5,000 to $10,000 or above, I think you really need to start having, someone either review the legal contract or at least provide some sort of legal consultation for what you're ultimately signing. NIL Go and this third-party database requires all NIL deals worth $600 or more must be reported. But the reality of it is you wouldn't want to enter an NIL deal for $2,000 and pay an attorney or an agent, $500 or $1,000 or something astronomical just to negotiate it for you. I think once you start getting into bigger dollars, let alone student athletes that are doing deals for 500, 1 million or 2.5 million, I think it needs to have attorneys review it or an agent representing you, looking out for your best interests. So I would advise any student athlete going through the process, take care of yourself, understand what you're signing, slow the process down, and ask questions if you don't know the answer. Sometimes the smartest person in the room is the person that says, I don't know. And that person has the ability to help you understand or help you go through the process that you may not otherwise understand what's happening. And so I think just being realistic about where this is going is important for families to understand.
And is there delineation there between revenue share and true NIL endorsement type situations, or is it all one bucket?
Great question. And I think this is oftentimes very confusing for families as to what has to be reported or what is revenue share compared to NIL. There are two distinct streams of income that can come from a university for your NIL licensing agreement to essentially sign over your licensing rights to a university. The first being revenue share. What revenue share is money being shared from the school directly to the student athlete. There's no other way around it. None of that has to be reported. That's not money, essentially, that has to be reported to NIL Go or that has to be overseen by a third party that says, does this meet a valid business purpose or is this fair market value? None of that. Revenue share can be whatever the school wants, and there are its own separate reporting details within the university and the College Sports Commission that you have to follow and stay under the cap. But that's one stream of income, is revenue share. The second stream of income can be NIL to supplement a revenue share deal. So NIL, which has to meet a valid business purpose, which has to be reported into NIL Go, and which has to pass this fair market value range of compensation test, that can be additional money you earn outside of what you may get from the school. That sometimes used to come from collectives. It could come from separate businesses. And if it meets a valid business purpose and there are actual deliverables that you have to, do, services that you have to do, whether it's autograph sessions, whether it's showing up at the Boys and Girls Club, whether it's, showing up to do promotional commercial work or appearing in podcasts, those type of things. That's what NIL is about, using your true name, image, likeness to get paid for it.
So let's talk about true name, image, and likeness. And let's talk about those non-football, basketball, top women's basketball sports. What sort of opportunity do you believe is out there for them?
There's a lot of opportunities if you're a marketable athlete. And there's nothing wrong with being an athlete that doesn't have a market value. I'm humbled enough to say that as a student athlete in college, I would have had a very low marketable value as a Patriot League student athlete. And that's okay. Sometimes the scholarship is all you need. If you're able to get a scholarship, sometimes having your books paid for is all you need. And that in and of itself is an incredible deal and a value. You're being rewarded for your ability to play. Now, for the non-revenue earning sports, that could be tennis, that could be cross country, golf, baseball, those type of sports. There are still avenues if you find yourself marketable in order to enter an NIL deal. That could be with a local coffee shop. That could be with an insurance representative. That could be with a local jewelry store. Whatever that may be, to use your name, image, likeness for you to appear in commercials or other things and enter into an NIL deal. I tell families this all the time. Don't ever turn your back on an NIL deal that you think, oh, this isn't going to pay me enough money. Obviously, if it doesn't meet what you stand for, if it's trying to promote something that you don't stand for, well, there's no reason to ever enter into that or entertain it. But if someone comes forward with you at a coffee shop and says, I'd like to enter an NIL deal or work with you, if you'd help promote our business for $1,500, that's real money. And you and I both know as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, that's a ton of money for a college kid. In a small town or even in a big town. And that money can go a long way. So it's important to understand there are opportunities that are out there. It just has to be the right fit depending on the student athlete.
One of the favorite phrases I've ever heard is we never put a salary cap on our life. And for those student athletes, there is still real opportunity out there.
Yes, absolutely.
At NIL Game Plan, we talk a lot about building the athlete as a business. At what age should athletes, and more importantly, their families, start realistically thinking about branding, content, and long-term reputation?
I think it starts at a younger age than it ever has before. Is these college basketball programs are essentially operating as professional organizations. And that's not something that the NCAA necessarily wants to admit, or that's really being admitted on paper. But the reality of it is that these major universities, and mostly the Power Four universities, are operating as a professional team. And now they're looking down what used to be the farm system and, kind of a Major League Baseball reference, Class A, AA, AAA, or the European soccer, and saying, who can we look at that's coming up into our professional organization that's going to be a part of our culture, part of our program, part of our team, and really part of the organization to help us win a championship? And that now starts in that 7th, 8th grade and into high school years as to what this kid and what this family is all about. Obviously, some of the top targets in the country, some of the top 100 prospects, those type of kids are getting much more attention at a much younger age. But I will always say this, is that your social media brand, or the brand that you are, your digital brand, if you will, is trackable for a long time. And so colleges that do their due diligence will really look back and go back in time to see what this person or what this family is all about. Because what you cannot do is bring a problem into your program when you're running a multi-million-dollar organization. If you look at college sports or look at each individual team as a business that might be a local business in your community, you'd have to ask yourself, would we hire these type of people to come into our business to help take us to the next level? And just like any good business, you do your background checks. You do look in to see, how has this person been in their future? Did they win when they were younger? Do people like them? Do they get along with their teachers? Do they respect their janitors? Things like that. And that can really go a long way. So for your platform, I would always advise it's better to start early than never start at all, starting to brand yourself and realizing what your net worth could be someday.
And speaking of building that business, one of the things we encourage families to look at is forming an LLC at an early age. From your legal perspective, do you have a point of view on starting early with a legal framework for these student athletes and families?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say this, is I don't think you need to necessarily develop the LLC until the money starts becoming more real. And I think that can come typically in your later years of high school. That could be your, junior, senior years. If you start to realize I may end up receiving a major lump sum of money, and whether it is for some sort of, tax break, or whether it is for some sort of private protection that you want your money to go into an LLC to start a future business or whatever that may be, then that could be to your benefit. But I always want to caution that when you open an LLC, there are consequences with that. There are business consequences with having an organization. There are filing fees with the state. There's a duty to keep the state updated with your operation agreement, your articles of incorporation, and remain in good standing. So it does sound good on paper, but you just got to make sure you know what you're following through really for the rest of your playing career.
Couldn't agree more. That's why you need to absolutely have everything buttoned up. People just doing it on the side,
Right.
More often than not, it could come back to bite you unless you really become educated about what this opportunity is and what that decision really means.
Right.
Mitch, can you talk about your current role in both the advisory role as well as your official role at the NBPA?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to develop a working and consulting relationship with the National Basketball Association and their Players Association. It's started from a friendship from a long time ago with Sean Livingston. He was a 3-time NBA champion.
It's funny how those relationships play out over 40 years.
It always does. And Sean and I actually grew up together. We grew up in the same hometown. And so I've known him for a very long time, and he knows that I've been very active in the space. And I've spoken at some major national sporting events. And this was a perfect segue into our relationship, into helping the Players Association. And so this June, here in a few weeks, I'll be back in South Carolina speaking at the NBA Top 100 Camp for some of the most talented and prized recruits in the country. And really my role is educating them. It's educating their parents. It's giving them essentially access to what is happening behind the scenes that they need to know about and be on guard for. And so whether it's speaking at the Top 100 Camp or being at the All-Star Game at some of these major, high school basketball tournaments, it's really provided me a nice outlet to continue to mentor, educate, and help families in need.
Even at that top 100 level, what mistakes do you hope they avoid?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that the shiniest new object is not always an object, and sometimes it can be explosive. And you got to be on guard, is that sometimes when it's too good to be true, it usually is. And so just because they may be entering a deal and some of these players are truly at the 500,000 million plus mark, is that just like I talked about it earlier, is that $500,000 quickly turns into 300 before you can blink. And so, I think financial literacy and financial management is a very important part of it. But from my side of it, more on the legal side of it, is understanding what these contracts actually are telling them they have to do and what are they ultimately giving up. And so what not many people know is in a lot of contracts, you have to look and pay attention to the word exclusivity. Am I giving my rights away in perpetuity, which means forever, or am I giving my rights away exclusively to this brand or to this industry, and now I'm no longer able to give those rights away somewhere else? And so a lot of times, student athletes may see something, and all they see, and you and I both know this, is the number. What am I going to be paid? What am I going to get out of this deal? Maybe they're
show me the money.
Show me the money. And that can really get you in hot water quickly. So my role is to educate them on what these, 2, 4, 10-page contracts actually say, and do my best to try to help them, protect them from themselves.
All right. Last question. And what has that taught you?
It's taught me that, it's very important. I think knowledge is power. And I think being in a position of mentorship comes with great responsibility. And being able to guide these kids, guide these families in the right direction is beneficial for everybody involved. It helps the student athletes understand what they're signing. It helps their families stay protected. But in turn, it also actually helps the university too, because the university now knows what they're getting with the student athlete. Because sometimes these agreements, it shouldn't benefit the student athlete solely, nor should it benefit the university. I think there should be a mutual understanding of what both parties are entering into, so there's no hard feelings at the end if somebody enters the transfer portal. And I think sometimes when you figure things out too late, that's when lawsuits can come up, or people start getting in hot water asking legal questions on what can I do now, and oftentimes it can be too late.
Mitch, this has been amazing. Where can we send people to find you on the web?
So I am partner at the Quinn Johnston law firm, where I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois, but I'm also pretty active on X, my username at Mitch Gilfillan, which is just my whole name with no periods or spaces. And then I'm also on Instagram as well, at Gilfillan21, where I frequently share content or updates going on in the legal world involving sports. And it's certainly, I receive a lot of feedback and happy to answer questions when they come my way.
All right. We'll post your links as well as on the pod. But Mitch, thank you so much for being on. Hope to talk to you again on NIL Game Plan's NIL Spotlight. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to visit NILgameplan.com to get started on your NIL journey for free. We'll see you next week.